Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Russell Matthews Show. I got a question for you. Did you know I didn't know? I didn't know this. You might have known this. But who knew that the fate of our entire country, the future of Canada, rested squarely on the shoulders of some 16-year-old boys? Because I have some intel here, something that's not been brought into the conversation yet. You know, I'm well connected. I'm paid heavily by the NDP, the Conservatives, the Liberals, lobbying them all. Of course, you know this about me. You know this to be true. As a result, I've gathered some pretty good sources within the Prime Minister's office, and apparently there's some business that went down that we haven't heard about. You heard that Trudeau went down to Mar-a-Lago, but it seems like there was a little bit of side action that was going on there. It seemed that there was a bet that must have been placed. A bet on the entire country that must have been placed. All in relation to the World Juniors, the Canadian Hockey World Juniors, these 16 and 17-year-old boys. I can't think of anything else because it seems that Trump has won Canada. And honestly, if the Americans can win back-to-back World Junior Championships, then honestly they should have us. I'm for it. I'm for it. You know what? I think that Canada probably first dibs goes to Czechia because they eliminated Canada. So maybe Trump is going to have to fight the Chechen government to take over Canada, because that is the story of the day. Trump making all of these claims about Canada becoming the 51st state, 52nd state. What is it? We're going to get into that. But in terms of this bet, I think that honestly, maybe that should be the way that we settle geopolitical confrontation, right? Screw sending hundreds of billions of dollars and enriching our weapons manufacturers. Why don't we just take it out on the ice? It could be a nice tradition, right? Canada-US World Juniors game. Either you're fighting to claim the other territory or to regain your own sovereignty. I think maybe if Canada skills it up a little bit next year, we might be able to get our country back. I think that's a good idea. Also, there's one other way out that I heard, and it's that this same contract had this bet, this gamble. They opened up DraftKings. It did have a buyout clause, though. You can close it early. It turns out that there's hope, because if Mark Carney comes in as Liberal leader, maybe even as an interim prime minister, well, then we could execute that buyout clause, print $1 billion, and maybe just a little bit of a Louisiana Purchase situation, get the country back. This is why I believe that Mark Carney should be the next prime minister of Canada, so that we can quantitative ease our way out of both our hockey woes as well as the loss of our country. What a time we're living in. What a time we're living in. Some of this is overblown. Yeah, you've seen it today and yesterday, everybody talking. I'm going to show you the clip of the claims that Trump has made. You've seen people talking about it. I'm curious what you think about it. I've got some thoughts. Some people are overreacting. Some people are underreacting. We're going to get into that today. If you aren't familiar with what I'm talking about here, let's just get you up to date here, and let's listen in on this press conference where maybe some of the claims that Trump has been making about Canada should become part of America. Maybe he's more serious than we thought. Listen to this.
Mr. President, if we were to work under the assumption that you're serious about making Canada 51st state of the United States, the leader of the Conservative Party in Canada said, under no circumstance will it ever be the 51st state.
Maybe he won't win, but maybe he will. I don't
point, you had suggested.
Listen, I don't care what he says.
But Sir, real fast, you said you were considering military force to acquire Panama and Greenland. Are you also considering military force to annex and acquire Canada?
No, economic force. Because Canada and the United States, that would really be something. You get rid of that artificially drawn line, and you take a look at what that looks like, and it would also be much better for national security. Don't forget, we basically protect Canada. But here's the problem with Canada. So many friends up there. I love the Canadian people. They're great. But we're spending hundreds of billions a year to protect it. We're spending hundreds of billions a year to take care of Canada. We lose in trade deficits. We're losing massive. We don't need their cars. You know, they make 20% of our cars. We don't need that. I'd rather make them in Detroit.
So there's the clip for you. maybe kind of what you're expecting to hear from him. A little bit, as expected to hear him say that he's not going to use military force to come in to Canada. Bear with me here. I'm dealing with studio. Okay, there we go. New studio, but clearly an old brain when it comes to operating it. So some things that you expect there, he says that we're going to use economic force. There's some evidence to say that America and certain American interests have been working for quite a long time to make sure that Canada isn't economically strong. I mean, that's the only way that you can really make an argument that this would be any kind of a good idea is Canada's economic performance compared to the U.S. Now, of course, we have all kinds of natural resources. And honestly, we're going to get into all of my thoughts on this in just a second, because I don't even think that what people are talking about today is the real issue that all of this talk brings up. I think that there's a bigger issue than this noise. And this issue, I believe, is why these offers to absorb Canada are actually landing with some people. Some people are saying, hey, this is a good idea. And later in the episode, later on in the show, we're going to talk about Trudeau's legacy, some of the best things that he did while he was in power, but also what I believe to be Trudeau's greatest sin. One that I think forever changed the country. You might be surprised what we'll talk about there. And we'll talk a little bit about a new Canadian tax. A new Canadian tax that, unlike other taxes, has not been voted through Parliament. A new Canadian tax that might be existing for only 1 month, only 2 months, and then disappears, all to the tune of millions of dollars spent on public service. We'll talk about this. But first, the big issue of the day, and that are these claims. And it's not about will Canada be absorbed. It's not about should we. It's not about it's about how did we get here? How did we get to this place where there are Canadians that are saying, hey, maybe these are some good ideas? I'm showing you a tweet here from the Blood Reporter, another YouTuber, who's like, okay, regardless of it, whether or not he believes that we should be part of the States, there are some reasons. There are some reasons that people could have this idea. You can make a pro and con list. You can make a pro and con list, but if this were actually a strong country, I don't think that list would matter whatsoever. You could make every kind of economic argument. You could make every single negative argument saying, hey, economically, well, we have all these resources. We have all of these, we have the largest land mass. We have access to all of this fresh water, could be important in the future. You can make those arguments. But the fact that we're even sort of talking about those pros and cons says a lot more about the country. And I think that is the actual story here. Because here's my question, actually, and I don't have a good answer for this. I wonder if you do. What does it mean to be Canadian? I'll ask it again. What does it mean to be Canadian? I'm not personally so sure anymore. I don't know if I ever was so sure. And it goes back to what at least people my age, I'm 28. I had to think about that for a second. People my age, when we were in school in the first and second grade, third grade, we were taught a lot about America and Canada, the differences between them, from the perspective of our culture. You might have heard the term of a melting pot and a mixing pot. This is something that I've heard every single year at school. In America, well, they have a melting pot. They bring in people from all different cultures from all around the world, and they throw them all in this big melting pot that is America, stir them up, turn up the heat a little bit, and eventually everyone kind of becomes American, with little hints and little flavors and little spices from different cultures getting incorporated into the American identity. A melting pot. You take all of these individual things, melt it down, it becomes one substance. Now, in Canada, we were told that that's not the way to do it. You shouldn't be worried about being cohesive as a unit or as a people. Honestly, that's a little bit racist because you're not letting people live the lives they want to live. No, Canada, we are better. We've got a better system here. We've got not a melting pot, but a mixing pot. We're just like a salad spinner or something. You put all the things in the bowl. You mix them all up. And you can kind of see it's one big thing, but there's all the individual ingredients, and you can tell which ingredients are which, right? You can still see all of the original components. Sure, we might be part of one big salad, right? But we are not one cohesive thing, like all of the ingredients melted down to make a soup in a melting pot. You understand this analogy and what I'm getting at here. We were told that melting is the way to go, or is not the way to go. We were told that mixing is the way to go. A mixing pot where everybody remains themselves. These cultures remain entirely themselves. But I think that we've lost something in that. And maybe this is, I'm not trying to be a racist here in saying anything, but maybe there is something to looking for assimilation from the people that come into Canada. Maybe there's something important about us having these strong national personal ties, things that we're all the same, right? We have a big country, 40 million in terms of the globe is rather big compared to most countries. So maybe we have a harder time just becoming one sort of homogenous thing, but we were taught that was not the way to go. So what has that resulted in? I think we don't have this national identity. I don't know how to answer the question. And let me go back to my full cam. I should have been on this the whole time. Bear with me, folks. What does that result in? One, well, we don't know what Canada is. We don't have this sense of national pride about our country, and we are a people, we are unique, and we can pull together, we are together. It makes looking at lists and pros and cons for being absorbed by another country actually reasonable to do because there's not an emotional tie that people have to the country anymore, right? Like if we were an emotionally strong and an emotionally united country, we would see these claims and be like, well, regardless of the economic benefits that you can say, we can make the changes to our country that we are proud of to get us to a place where we have a better system or a better country than the one that's claiming that it can make a lot of things better for us. We would turn a blind eye to some of the facts and some of the ideas that suggest that this could be a good idea if we were one national unit. Now, obviously, you can't get to one national unit in its truest form, everybody being on the same page about everything. You're never going to have that. But I'm questioning the mixing melting pot trade-offs, right? Like we see what's happening with the conflicts that have been going on here in Canada, the protests that have been going on here. We've talked about it a lot on the channel. We've talked about organization. Like, okay, let me give you one example, right? We see the conflict between India and the Khalistan movement, right? Short little thing here. Obviously, it's a very nuanced topic, but I'll give you the brass tacks right now. There's a group of cultural Sikhs who believe that they have a claim to have their own sovereign territory in the north of India. India believes them to be terrorists, separatists, and they persecute them in that country. They say, hey, you can't have the north part of India. As a result, a lot of those people who are in favor of that independent state existing in the north of India have moved around the world, including into Canada, and have continued their political activities to try to stake their claim to this land. Okay, sure. Fine, there's this conflict, but I think that a result of welcoming Canadians into Canada who aren't truly incentivized to want to stay here, have a ulterior place to go or an ulterior goal. Are you bringing Canadians in who want to be Canadian and want to live here and want to be a part of our cultural identity? Or are you serving as a temporary stopgap in the meantime? This is what's caused a lot of the conflicts between India and Canada over the past year. The murder of Singh Najar, all of this stuff going down. I think a lot of these problems are all rooting from this same sort of thing. And I don't know what to think about that political controversy. I don't know who's right or who's wrong when it comes to that land claim in the north of India. And I don't think that I should have to understand that. And I honestly don't think that a lot of that conflict and a lot of these geopolitical issues should be imported into Canada as a result of people coming to Canada that don't want to be Canadian, or at least that's maybe I'm wrong on this. Let me know what you think. But we've been stripped of a common culture. And this has happened in a couple different ways. And we've talked about it on the channel at length. We've been stripped of a common culture, and this stripping has happened as a result of decisions made by corporate and political elite. In my eyes, for financial benefit of those corporations. We can look at this with what even the Liberals are saying now was a mistake, which was the hugely fraudulent and overprescribed temporary foreign worker program, wherein businesses talked a big game to the government saying, we are in the worst labor shortage in the world. We need to bring in foreign workers who we can then exploit and pay them lower wages and not have to pay Canadians higher wages to have them come work, not actually have a competitive labor market. We need to bring in all of these people. It's important for the Canadian economy. Okay. 2 million people coming in over the course of a year and a half. Kind of hard to keep a core cultural identity, especially when you only have 40 million people in the country. It's a large percentage, right? We see the same thing with the international student program. These schools absolutely exploiting these international students who I don't think are entirely in the wrong here. These are people that have their mom and dad have sold the farm at home to send their one child to Canada in hopes for a better life and an education, when in reality, it turns out they're just being recruited to be pushed through a diploma mill. Come here, get your diploma. It's not really actually about the education. It's because you can get citizenship more easily once you've gone through this international student program and connections to that with the temporary foreign worker program. It's all about getting citizenship. But these are decisions that have been made by politicians and corporate elite working together, and it's gotten us to this point where we're like, yeah, what is really the benefit of being Canada? What is our cultural identity? Who are we? What does it mean to be Canadian? And we can't answer it. That's kind of messed up that we can't. What does it mean? Maybe this is just a very Ontario biased thing, but I look around me and I'm like, what is our shared identity? Maybe out in the Atlantic provinces, it's a little bit different. Let me know if you're tuning in from there. So all of these things, but I think the biggest one is the way that we've been economically stripped of a shared idea of Canada, right? Everything's unaffordable. Real estate prices have gone through the roof over the past 4 years, right? A little bit slower now in terms of growth, but incomes haven't caught up by any means. Incomes have not caught up to where housing has gone right now. You got to be making like 5 times the average income to afford the average house when it comes to mortgage rules and qualification like that. So if you can't buy a house, maybe you can't pay rent. Maybe you make a different decision about having a child or not having a child, or when you'll have that child. Maybe you make different decisions on that. Then as a result, with fewer children being born and fewer families choosing to have children, some like make whatever choice you want. The government and nobody should be able to tell you what you should do. But I have a hard time believing that more and more people will have children in the future. I think that economically we were being pushed in that direction, alongside the people who, of course, don't want to in the first place. But if we don't have this sort of tie to the future, this concern about our children and our children's children, and what kind of world are they going to live in? What kind of Canada are they going to live in? As fewer and fewer people have those concerns in mind, well, then there's less and less of an incentive to make that future better, to try to solve some of these problems. It's the same sort of thing as what I complain about with the members of parliament in Canada. And again, this has been a controversial thing in the past, but I don't think it really should be. I think that if you're a member of parliament in Canada, you should only have a Canadian citizenship. People will say, well, that's not representative of Canada. We've got people who are temporarily here, and we need to have them represented as well. People can have a Canadian citizenship and another citizenship. Of course, you need to be a Canadian citizen, but you can also have a secondary citizenship. I'm saying that shouldn't be the case. You shouldn't have an escape hatch. You shouldn't be able to hop into the escape pod when Darth Vader comes onto your ship and just when times get bad in Canada and just be like, okay, I have the option to peace out here. I can kind of screw over this country because ultimately I can just go and live in the other country that I have a citizenship in. I can go. I heard that there's some good land deals in Ukraine right now. I heard that maybe you could do some real estate development. You know what? Come to think of it, I think maybe that is Canada's shared culture. Maybe that's what it is at this point, we've lost in the World Juniors. We're probably going to lose every kind of Canadian sport moving forward. Maybe the culture isn't that. It isn't music. It isn't food. I think that the culture that we can export, well, we're going to export it now because people are leaving. The culture that we can export is real estate speculation, baby. Put all the chips on black. Maybe that's what Canada really is all about. Maybe we should just join hands and speculate on real estate, and maybe that will be like, no, we don't really want to. We're not going to join with the States because then how would we continue to buy pre-sale condos at the rate that we are right now? Hey, we go to another country. You don't need to have the Canadian citizenship or only Canadian citizenship to be an MP. Speculate on real estate in other places. This is how we can keep the Canadian legacy moving forward. It's just wild. All this to make the point that the fact that we're having this conversation says a lot more than the conversation itself. But maybe I'm part of the problem because we're talking about it today. Maybe that's just as bad. That is at least interesting to me. But I think that the one thing that goes across this entire conversation is that we honestly, I think, are taking these threats too seriously. I want to play you a clip from Doug Ford, who's just on Fox News today. Let me show you this, and then we'll talk more about it.
Joins me now. All right, Premier. By the way, I loved your brother. We did an interview. Great guy. Yeah, what's your problem with the United States absorbing Canada?
Well, first of all, Jesse, you know, I love the U.S. I love Americans. And I get it. You know, President-elect Trump is a real estate tycoon. He's made billions. But that property's not for sale. As simple as that. But I have a better idea, Jesse. Why don't we create Fortress AmCan and make sure it's the richest, wealthiest, most prosperous jurisdiction in the two countries anywhere in the world? We have the critical minerals. We have the energy. We have the electricity that America needs. And there's only one place I'd want to sell it to, and that's the U.S.
Well, you could sell it to us, or we could all own it together, and that's a choice we can all make together. You say this isn't for sale, but everything has a price. The $1 Million Man says that. Can you think of this more as a merger instead of an acquisition? Don't think about being taken over. Think about this as a coming together.
Yeah, look at that. I think this is, to my point, we're talking about this incredibly seriously here in Canada. We're talking about this and making ourselves look silly. I think we kind of look dumb. Like, you look at this Fox reporter's face. He's smirking after what he says. He knows it's just jabs. It's just maybe I can get this guy to react. I don't think it's serious. I know that we're treating it seriously. The American media is treating it seriously. There could be a lot of cake in my face if this ends up going down in the future. I don't think it's going to. I think it's pretty clear what's happening here. Pretty clear that this is all a ploy for the future. But look at the serious response that we give to this, giving it more and more oxygen. And I think that we're being laughed at.
Together on a great trade deal. We're two greatest countries in the world. Do you know what the problem is? I've lived 20 years in the U.S. Matter of fact, I spent a lot of time in Philly, where you did, for 7 years, and in Chicago. There's not one American that I speak to out there, Jesse, that has a problem with Canada. Do you know what the problem is? China's the problem. China is shipping in cheap parts into Mexico, and then Mexico slapping a Made in Mexico sticker on, shipping it up through the U.S. and Canada, costing American and Canadian jobs. Like, Mexico has to make a choice, Jesse.
I get
They're
it.
either with Beijing or Washington.
No, I get
tell
it.
you
I get it. You say that Americans don't have a problem with Canadians, and we don't. But it seems like you have a problem with us. Because if I were a citizen of another country and I was a neighbor of the United States, I would consider it a privilege to be taken over by the United States of America. That's what everybody else in the world wants, American citizenship. For some reason, that's repellent to you Canadians. And I find that personally offensive, Premier.
Well,
Am I wrong to think he's doing a bit? He's doing a bit, right? I don't think it's a serious thing here. I don't. That's the way I feel. Tell me I'm wrong. Tell me I'm wrong. I don't think it's a serious thing. I think this is pretty clearly a negotiation tactic, right? We have the trade agreement between U.S., Mexico, and Canada, the USMCA, formerly NAFTA. That's coming up over the next 6 months here. And have you ever done any negotiating ever in your life? Has anyone in Canada ever done any negotiating? The best way is to frame all of these demands, put them all on the table, say this is what we need. We're going extremely hard line on this thing, so eventually when things soften a little bit, both sides feel like they've gotten a good deal. It allows the other party to save some face. Trump and the states going right now saying, hey, we're going to take over Canada. Well, eventually, if we get a not favorable trade deal for Canada done, where the U.S. greatly benefits and Canada doesn't, maybe Canada can't develop certain industries because it would hurt America. I think that would be bullshit if it were to happen. But you get to a point where you can say, well, at least we're not flying the American flag on the top of the Parliament buildings. We're still a country, so anything looks good. Maybe we got a shit deal on the USMCA 2.0, but at least we're still Canada. This is what it feels like this really is just setting up the negotiation tactics so that the future leader in Canada, likely Pierre Poilievre, who knows, anything can happen, so that they can save face and say, no, actually, we've done a good job here, even though America has totally rinsed us, even though they've taken our lunch money, we're still a country. There are positives here. You can sell it a little bit better. You can say, at least we're still a country. I think that's what this is. And I think we look a little bit dumb getting so worked up about it. Oh yeah, I'm part of the problem. We're talking about it on the episode today. So what does that say about me? A little bit of a hypocrite, perhaps. But there's more I want to talk about here because this isn't all that's going on right now. We also have Trudeau resigned. We talked about this a couple of days ago. And it puts Canada in a lame duck prime minister phase. Now, that's a big deal. I think it's irresponsible. But we've been in this phase actually for a little while. The premiers in Canada and the presidents and other leaders of world governments all throughout the world have known that talking to the Trudeau government is kind of a waste of breath, right? If we know that there's going to be another leader in here, well, then any work that we do today isn't going to get us across the line on these decisions that we need to make. And so we're in a lame duck situation. It's irresponsible because there's a lot of things going on in Canada. Even just a couple of months ago, the Liberals' line was, we cannot go into an election now. The Conservatives are irresponsible. The Bloc Québécois are irresponsible for suggesting that they want to trigger an election now. We need to just do a cabinet shuffle, and we need to keep on working for Canadians, working to solve their problems. This is pretty much exactly what Trudeau and all the other Liberals were saying just a couple of months ago. Now, we need to prorogue Parliament. 3 months are going to roll down the road. It's just fine. It's just fine that there's not going to be anything passed through the House of Commons. It's just fine that this is where our focus is going now. Obviously, an election would take our focus away even more. But we're still going to have that at the end of this Liberal leadership race. So it's irresponsible. But there's a bigger issue here. There is a bigger issue here. A smaller issue is that this leadership race, I'm not convinced, is going to be democratic in any way. We've seen with all of the interference allegations over the past year, we've learned that Canada's democracy works pretty well. Right? This is what the national security agencies in Canada have said to us in committee meetings. They said, well, for the most part, Canada's democracy works, but we have some vulnerabilities. And those vulnerabilities are at the level, or the individual party level. Because the Liberal leadership race, just like the Liberal member of Parliament race to see who's going to represent a given riding, that's all not very heavily regulated. That's all governed by internal party rules. Same goes for the Conservatives, I believe, and the NDP and most of the other political parties. You don't even have to be a Canadian citizen to vote in these. You just need to be a card-carrying member. And there's evidence to believe that you don't even need to be a card-carrying member. You can just sign up on the day of and vote. We saw this in Han Dong's riding, or allegedly, right, where busloads of people were brought in to help him win the Don Valley North riding, essentially meaning that he would be a shoo-in to win a seat in Parliament because that's a riding that always goes Liberal. Same sort of thing I'm concerned about here with this Liberal leadership race. There could be some funny business that goes on here. Is there going to be vote busing in for who this next leader is? Ultimately, a little bit less consequential in my eyes because of the polling numbers right now. I don't know if there's anybody who can save the Liberals. It would be the comeback of the century. Talk about an underdog story. If the Liberals were to bring in Mark Carney and convince Canadians that we need a two-time central banker, globalist guy to be the leader of the country after what we've seen, crazier things have happened. Would be quite the dog story. Would be. I hope that I'm like Trump and Trudeau and open up my DraftKings, open up whatever. Yeah, I'm not sponsored. I shouldn't be saying. Open up my arbitrary sports betting book app of choice. That's what you should be betting on, I think. But all of this is secondary. We might not even have an election after this leadership race. I want to show you something else here. It's from Charlie Angus of the NDP, and a post that he made just before the Christmas break. Not this one. This one. We're still learning here, folks. But this is Charlie Angus. He's an NDP member of Parliament. Now, the NDP have taken the position that the Liberal government is no longer functioning. We need to trigger an election. Finally, this is now that it doesn't matter to have this stance. This is when you have this stance, right? When you no longer can make this happen because Parliament's prorogued for 3 months. That's when you choose to have this stance, of course, a little bit hypocritical, but there's reason to believe that even come March, we may not get an election here because it seems that some of Jagmeet Singh's caucus, some of the other members of Parliament, like Charlie here, are saying, I'm going to put country above party. I know that the NDP would do better in this election than we did last one because we take some seats from the Liberals probably. We'd probably be the official opposition. But I'm going to put Canada in front of our own party interests. He's saying, I personally, Charlie Angus, am so convinced that Canadians do not know what they need. I, Charlie Angus, am so convinced that I know if we were to go to an election, the Conservatives would win, and that would be the will of the people at this moment. But I'm so convinced that our country would be in ruins if that were to happen, that I'm probably not going to vote in no confidence in this government to trigger an election. Of course, that would be a personal lie, right? Because I don't think that anyone can look at the way the government has been functioning prior to this Trudeau resignation and the Freeland drama and post. I don't think that you can say that this parliament has been functioning, not for average Canadians. But he says, I'm going to put my country in front of my political party because I'm going to save Canadians from themselves because they don't realize the risk that they're taking. They don't realize how bad things will get for them when Conservatives are in power. This seems to be what he's saying. And it's the very thing that frustrates me most about politicians is this belief that they know better than you do, right? This idea of, and this maybe is the chief theme of this show, is that there are people out there who maybe are believing that they're making choices in your best interests. But the kind of hubris and the kind of ego that you have to be so sure of yourself that you know best and the masses, the unwashed masses, don't know what's best for them. Talk about being the party of the working people when this is what the NDP is supposed to be built on. Talk about that. But you don't trust in these people. They're actually not smart enough to make decisions for themselves. We can't trust them to go to an election because of what we fear they might do. I don't buy it. But this isn't all that happens from this prorogation of Parliament. Also, we have a new tax law. I mentioned this at the top of the program. A new tax. I've talked about it on the show before. A new tax coming into play in Canada that hasn't made its way through the House of Commons. Hasn't been passed. Nobody's voted on it. None of the people who are representing us have voted on it. They've voted in general in favor of the idea of it because the idea was included in a budget, but there's no legislation on how this should be enforced, how much, or even the details of it passed through legislation. We haven't seen any of that. I'm talking about the capital gains tax increase. I'm rusty on the exact numbers, but I believe above $1 million in capital gains in a year, then now the capital gains inclusion rate is at 66% or 75%. The brass tacks is that most Canadians don't have to deal with it. A lot of Canadians, sort of boomer age, maybe they have a cottage or something like this. They sell the property. They're going to have to pay a lot more tax in it, especially if it's not their primary residence. Now, we can debate about whether this is good or whether this is bad, what it does for Canada, who does it punish, who does it benefit. We can talk all about that till the horses come home. What's interesting to me is that it's being enforced now by the CRA. It's being enforced even though it hasn't passed. Now, there's some intricate parliamentary proceedings and precedent where the CRA should technically be enforcing this because it was introduced in a Ways and Means motion, and that means that now we have to enforce it, even if it doesn't pass. But then if it doesn't pass, then we got to correct. All this to say, the way that the Canadian government bureaucracy works is led us to a situation where the CRA is implementing and enforcing a tax that is not yet on the books and may not be on the books. It's collecting millions and millions of dollars from Canadians. I saw estimates that it would be around 100 or hundreds of millions, right? Who knows what it will be in practice? We'll have to wait to see a budget in the future. Collecting millions of dollars from Canadians at the very least, to then have a Liberal Party leadership race happen, and then an election happen following that. And then who knows who's in power, and will they want to pass this 6 months, 8 months from now, this capital gains tax? Probably not. They're probably not going to want to be associated with liberal parties that led to their demise, at least in part. So then 8 months from now, we've had 8 months of enforcement. The CRA has been going after people for this capital gains tax, encouraging them or requiring them to report it on their income taxes this year. All for that work and that manpower and those hours and the changes and the federal workers who would have to implement all of this. It's very likely that this tax will be reversed, and then we're going to have to apply for rebates, which will then be more paperwork and more communication with a ballooning agency. Like many agencies across Canada, the federal workforce has expanded dramatically. I'm just letting you know that this is happening, and it just gets to the point of, okay, maybe there's a lot of spending in the economy or in the government that is not necessary. Maybe there's a lot of government agencies that have been bloated, and a lot of government agencies where that bloat isn't even doing the work because they're outsourcing it to third-party consultants, all of which has grown dramatically over the past decade. It's just wild. I haven't seen something like that before. I think it's legal. I think they're doing the right thing, the CRA. I think that they're based on precedent and what usually happens. It's just wild to see. It is just wild to see. So I'm curious what you think about all of this stuff. Am I wrong that that people are overreacting about this Canada America absorption thing? Am I right that it should just be a high stakes sporting event each year? Canada versus US, fight for the country. Hey, maybe that's the move. Maybe we don't have to go to war anymore. I might be onto something here. I gotta show you this clip. It popped up on my before we close here. It popped up on my timeline. Okay, let me get this bad boy full screen. Come on. All right. Leafs just beat the Flyers last night. I don't know if you saw this. Leafs fan down here at the bottom, absolutely taunting in Philly. I love the Leafs. I'm a Leafs till I die kind of guy. I would not step foot in Philly wearing a Leafs jersey or any other jersey. I might wear a Flyers jersey if I went to a Flyers game. I'm just saying. But we got two Leafs fans taunting. What happens? Absolutely clocks him right hook, left hook. The two Leafs fans, no response, hands up. Obviously, violence, bad. You don't want to have this. Buddy had too many to drink. Probably goes to the drunk tank, probably gets charged. Don't do that. Don't punch people. But it just made me think that Canada has got a hope that Trump doesn't invade Canada, and that he, God forbid, uses military force. Because honestly, I think a guerrilla warfare squadron of 20 Phillies or 20 Flyers fans, 20 drunk Flyers fans could probably disarm the Canadian military at this point with how much it's atrophied. You can ask anyone in the military how downhill things have gone. 20 Flyers, especially if you got John Tortorella saying, okay, well, you take right flank, you take left flank. I think our Jets, no match for 20 drunk Philadelphia Flyers fans, John Tortorella and Gritty. We really have no chance here. It's a negotiating tactic. It's all about USMCA. We don't have a chance against Gritty and Torts. If you're not as into hockey as me, you think I sound like a crazy person, and I am. And maybe you're watching this because you're interested in the slow descent into madness that I'm experiencing day after day. It's fun. What can I say? It's fun. It's fun. More videos like this to come on the channel. You just watched an episode of the Russ Matthews Show. This is my longer form, unscripted podcast style where I just shoot the shit about what I'm interested in that day. I also make longer videos on the channel. If you're a longtime viewer of the channel, it's not only going to be videos like this moving forward. This might be something that happens more regularly. We're going to have the old setup right at my desk, talking in depth largely about financial issues, the way that economic policy, monetary policy, and central banking around the world impacts us a lot more than they'd like you to believe. This tends to be the general theme of the show. But Russ Matthews Show like this, hopefully multiple times weekly moving forwards. You can put me on in the background. Doesn't need to be something you watch the whole way through with your eyeballs. Podcast in the background. It's all good stuff. If you haven't already, subscribe to the channel. You might not know this. It doesn't cost you a dime. Doesn't cost you a loony. Does not cost you a thing. We're gonna have paper loonies here in a couple of months. It doesn't even cost you a paper loony. Click that button. Doesn't sign you up for anything. No spam. Just purely helps out the channel. So I appreciate you doing that. And with all that said, ladies and gentlemen, thanks so much for watching. I hope this video helped you out at least a little bit. I'll see you next time.